Does customer success own a revenue number in your organization? There's lots of ways to approach this. Let's break them down in today's episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Geoff Coutts, SVP of Sales and Customer Operations for Unbounce and Insightly. Today, I'm joined by Kristi Faltorusso, Chief Customer Officer at ClientSuccess. Thanks for joining us, Kristi.
Thanks, Geoff. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. We are too. First of all, where are you joining us from? What part of the world are you in today?
So I am in New York, but I am on Long Island. So very specific. I have to make sure that's very clear because I feel like anytime I say New York, people think Manhattan, and I'm definitely not close to the city.
That's so true. Good clarification. Thank you. Well, it's great to have you on the show. Can you, maybe for people that aren't as familiar with you or your organization, tell us a little bit about ClientSuccess and your role in the company?
Absolutely. So ClientSuccess is a customer success management platform. So we help customers manage from what we say from new to renew, that entire post-initial sales lifecycle. So everything from onboarding all the way through retention, expansion, growth, and advocacy. I'm our Chief Customer Officer. So I've been with the company for it'll be 4 years on Saturday. And so I oversee everything in that post-initial sales org. So that's success, support, and services for us.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm looking forward to talking about success. It's a really important function, I know, in our organization and in many, many companies. Maybe to start with a little bit about the market conditions right now. And I would say, it's probably no surprise there's a little bit of uncertainty out there in the market, especially across North America right now. And many organizations are thinking about what's their best path to create revenue growth. And they're challenged, I think, a lot of companies with new logo growth. So they're turning to CS to say, is there an opportunity for expanding our revenue in more of a growth motion and overemphasizing that versus new logo business? What's your view on that? What are you seeing in the market today?
What's funny is that this is the same behaviors that we saw several years ago as we were navigating the uncertainty during the pandemic. And so this isn't a new experience for the post-sales team. We definitely have faced this before. And so, listen, I think it's an interesting, approach for all businesses. It's not something that should pop up when times are bad. It should always be how you run your business, right? You bring customers in and the intention should always be to get them to stay and grow. Now, how you approach that and how you run that part of your business, I think, depends on a lot of variables. And I think we'll get into that today. But this is not an unfamiliar motion and should always have been part of how we think about business revenue.
Yeah. I just think about our experiences and, the whole notion of land and then expand is a very common one. And depending on the makeup of your products in your organization, there may be more of an opportunity to do that in some organizations versus others. But I think I would agree it's a really important function as part of a growing, especially a SaaS company. So let me ask you this. In general, revenue ownership by CS can be a mixed bag based on a lot of different factors. And frankly, it can be a little bit controversial. Not everybody signs up for a role A and is asked to do role B on top of that from a responsibility standpoint. Sales and CS are often seen as quite different. But in terms of your experience working with SaaS companies, what does that look like in terms of revenue ownership?
So, I don't think that there is one way to approach this. And I think what's interesting is that so many people have gotten on these, you get these little sound bites that happen to perpetuate the different industries. And so it was CS has to own revenue and has to own renewals or expansion or growth. And let me just tell you something. I have been at 5 different companies. All 5 companies I've been at, we have managed revenue very differently. In one, we didn't own any revenue. In some, we owned renewals, but not expansions. In some, we owned renewals and expansions, but not cross-sell. We own expansions and upsell, right? There's so many variations of this. And so I'm always going to give a big fat, it depends, because there is no right or wrong way to do it. You have to do the appropriate thing for your organization and, more importantly, your customers. So when it comes down to it, I'm not opposed to owning a number. And I think as a leader, I need to be open to owning the number. And in fact, in a lot of them, I did own a revenue number, but depending on what the motion needed to be, who executed the motions and the operations behind it could vary.
That's it's an important way to look at it. When I think back about the different roles that you or I have had, it is quite different based on the makeup of the company. But how do organizations, in your opinion, find that right structure? Is it based on things like, well, how big is the ACV, the contract value, or the annual contract value? Is it a segment issue between SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise? Is it the term of the contract? What are the different variables that you see making up the way that you can determine what that structure should look like?
So I think oftentimes the drivers there are much deeper than that, right? So if you think about the level of complexity of the products that you sell, I often start there. If you think about something that is like an Oracle, or if you think about Adobe or Salesforce, right, you have a suite of products, right? Which means any one customer could have 5 of your solutions, and all 5 of those could have different buyers with different budgets and different timelines. And there's so much complexity to how you might run the commercial motions again, that because of what your product is, right? How you sell your product. So I think it's important to first start with that. Like, what is it that you're selling and what does the motion look like there? Because if I am a CSM and I'm managing a customer and they have a product and we're having them use it, it's going to be a very different motion if you tell me we're going to run a cross-sell play to a different team in the organization that has a different budget, right? The activities and what I have to do is very different. So I always say start with understanding what is the scope of what the objective is. Like, what is it that we're trying to push? What are we selling? Now, beyond that, I do think it's important to consider the customer. In my time, I've worked with large enterprises, so think like GE, all the way down to small SMB, mom and pop shops. And so, yes, the motion there is very different, right? When you're working with a very large enterprise organization, you're going to have a very long time cycle, right? It's going to be procurement and legal and security reviews on top of negotiations and understanding value adds and needs and all of this stuff. Whereas with a small transactional account, it's going to be just that, very transactional. Renewal can be done in a day. So there are so many factors at play here. And I think because every company and the market and your customers is so unique, all of those variables have to be considered to figure out what's appropriate.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I think matching the product makeup as well as the size of company are 2 really important factors that you called out there. One of the things you mentioned a minute ago is around renewals. It might be a little bit tactical, but I think the first touch point where this starts to really hit the road is who's responsible for renewals? Is it sales or CSMs, and how would they work together? What's your view on managing renewals?
Again, it depends. Like, nobody loves my answers because my answer is always, it depends, because of the complexity of it, right? I do think regardless of who owns the motion, the customer success team, I think at the end of the day, is accountable for it as the outcome, because the renewal is going to happen if they delivered on the promise that was sold, right? And I think that that's where the accountability lies. But who runs it? It could be a renewals manager. It could be the CSM. It could be the new sales team. It doesn't really matter. I think it's, again, trying to figure out what's appropriate based on bandwidth. And again, what does the motion look like? So again, a lot of considerations there. But at the end of the day, I do think that there is some accountability that has to lie with the customer success team. And this is where incentivizing the right behaviors, I think, is really appropriate. So whether it's having, their OTE or a bonus or a spiff or something where you're incentivizing it from a revenue standpoint, making sure that that is the outcome that happens. But again, from a who actually does the work, I don't know. I've seen it sliced and diced so many different ways, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong one.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just reflecting on my own organization here. And we decided that the CSM would be ultimately responsible for all of the renewals. And then there's a collaborative motion between the CSM and the growth AE to make sure we're properly supporting every customer, but also making sure that we are looking at opportunities for upsell and cross-sell at the same time, because it is an important inflection point. Some organizations have a specific renewal manager or renewal person who is responsible for only that. Where do you see that fitting into the equation?
I mean, listen, I think if your product, if it's a very transactional process and even the product that you sell, there's not a lot of complexity there. I think having a renewals manager there is fine because, again, you're not asking them to do any strategic work. Usually it's like, it's almost an assumptive close where you just have somebody kind of going through the motions. I almost feel like it's a little bit of more of a junior role. Whereas when I think about very strategic motions, I think the collaboration with an account manager or customer success manager, whether it's the AE, there is different conversations that need to be had. There is a different there's a different sales strategy, right? And the methodology that you use to support that, to ensure that the right outcome happens, it's very different. Now, I've led teams with both. And oftentimes what I find is just that, right? When I have a renewals manager, it is somebody who can operate a bit more independent from the other teams, doesn't need that necessarily that collaboration and that strategy behind it. It can be something that happens independent of all the other work that's happening alongside.
Okay, got it. Let's pull on that thread just a little bit. You mentioned, some organizations, the solution is a bit more sophisticated than others. Let's take an example of a sophisticated organization, and the CSM is involved, and there's a renewal. How do you see their role in the expansion motion on top of the renewal? If it's a sophisticated solution that in your company has a lot more to offer than what the customer is using today.
I mean, at the end of the day, your CSM should be very in tune with what the customer's pain points are and also what their goals and objectives are, and not just for your product, but in general. And so if we have clarity around that, we should actually be the ones recommending what the customer needs or should be using in order to achieve those goals. So we should be leaning in very thoughtfully and selling from that consultative lens of this is what the customer needs because this is what they're trying to achieve. So I don't care who owns it. Again, the operations part of it to me is always like, I don't care. But from a strategy standpoint, your CSM should be the most dialed in. Now, I often find that there's a little resistance. Obviously, not everybody has interest in selling, but at the end of the day, you know what we do? We sell value, right? We sell outcomes. So even if you're not doing the commercial activities, we are all sellers. And so I do think that the CSMs have to play a very strategic role in that.
That's great. It leads me to think just a little bit more about the skill set side of the equation. So your comment that the CSM needs to understand the customer the best, I completely agree with. What about the notion that, as a professional, somebody signed up for one of two different career paths? A CSM is really all about bringing the most value to that customer and managing them and making sure that they're taking advantage of your solution. The sales executive, the growth AE, is really focused on hitting a number and a quota and cross-selling and upselling. How do you feel about mixing and matching those two different streams together? Because not everybody in either one of those roles wants to do the other role. Do you think there's an opportunity to manage that really well?
Well, I think it comes down to skill and will, right? And those are the two factors that I always consider. You might have the skills to do something, but you might not be willing to do it. On the other side, you might be willing to do it, but you might not have the skills to do it. Now, obviously, in a beautiful world, you'll have both. But, it does come down to that a little bit. As organizations change and evolve, roles do as well. And if you don't want to do that work, that is okay. Maybe this is no longer the opportunity for you. But when a company decides to go in a specific direction because it's the best for the business and the customer, and you're resistant to that, it's probably time for you to figure out another path. I am not interested in folks that aren't open-minded to growth and understanding new opportunities and want to develop and evolve their skill set. I do think there is value in everybody understanding sales, because at the end of the day, we all sell. We all sell. And it doesn't matter. I mean, we think about it so transactionally, and they used car salesman, right? Like, it always gave everybody a bad rap, but like, we sell value, we sell outcomes, we sell these things. And so for folks that just are so off, they're really kind of put off by that, I do think it's a huge disservice to them professionally. But if you don't want to do the work, you don't have to do the work. You got to find a new job though. I don't know. I think that there is value in us expanding our skill set and our mind as well, and understanding that, sometimes the job evolves and you can either evolve with it or you can figure out what your next path is.
I love that. I love that so much, that everybody is in sales. It's a little bit of a matter of degree and skill set.
Yeah.
But, the will needs to be there to take on some portion of it. It's just a matter of how much, in my mind. I love the way you phrased that. So last question, and it's really around, given everything that you've said about the role of CS and expansion and renewals, how do you feel about the role of CS leadership and what they should be doing to encourage this whole motion?
Okay, so I think the biggest challenge that at least I see and I hear today is that you've got folks that just don't have the skills, right? Because to your point, right, CS at some point in time very much came through this pathway of like, we're consultants, we're consultative, where there is a value add, helping our customers and guiding them in education, right? All of these things that didn't feel salesy. And so whether or not you're willing to do the work, which I think a lot of folks are, I think you have resistance because they're scared because they don't have the skills. Now, if you're a leader and you're now having your team take on the commercial motion, it is your responsibility to invest in training and enabling these teams. If they did not come in with the skills to do this work, you cannot expect them to do it and be successful without teaching them. Now, if you're a CS leader and you also lack those skills, it is your responsibility to then maybe either bring somebody else in to train all of you, for you to get trained yourself and then disseminate those learnings. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with us, right? So you can't expect people to be successful doing work they've never done before and have never seen done well.
I love it. I love it. I think the value of the leader is so important for the individual CSMs to be able to take some guidance and leadership from and direction. It's I agree with you. It's critically important. Kristi, thanks for taking us through this today. Really love the topic. I love how you look at the marketplace, and this has been super valuable. Maybe just a quick plug for you. If our listeners want to stay connected with you, where should they go?
2 places to find me. You can go head over to LinkedIn. I can be found under Kristi Faltorusso. I believe I'm the only one on LinkedIn. Or you can head over to my website, KristiFaltorusso.com. Tons of resources and information over there as well.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in today. Feel free to sign up for the Closing Time newsletter to get this show delivered right to your inbox. Click the link in the show notes now, and you'll also find clips on Insightly's social channels. We'll see you next time on Closing Time. Thanks for joining.